Welcome to the CNN Town Hall, America Addicted, the Fentanyl Crisis. We are looking tonight at a drug invented in 1959 and first approved in 1968 that went from a mainstay in hospital settings and a godsend to people with severe chronic pain to an illegally produced synthetic killer of Americans. Many of them young people who were not hardcore drug users, not addicted, but handed a pill they thought was a Xanax or a Percocet at a party or by a friend. One pill that may have only had a tiny amount of fentanyl, the size of a pencil tip, but it was enough to kill them. Fentanyl is a destroyer of our children and our families. I want you at home to take a look for a moment around the room that we're in right now tonight. Every one of our guests and all of our studio audience has in some way been touched by this crisis. And again, we want to make it clear that doesn't just mean by addiction. Accidental poisoning by fentanyl is a major, major problem as well. According to the Centers for Disease Control, more than 70,000 people in this country died in 2021 from fentanyl and other synthetic opioids. 70,000 Americans a year, up from nearly none just 20 years ago. One reason why, take a look at these two vials. In one, a lethal dose of heroin. In the other, so little you can barely see it, is a lethal dose of fentanyl. It is cheap to make, it's easy to smuggle, simple to mix into other drugs. And though fentanyl abuse and deaths are a nationwide problem, some states are especially hard hit. The darkest colors on the map represent the greatest number of deaths per 100,000, with ground zero being Appalachia, West Virginia in particular. And we'll talk to a medical professional from there tonight as well. And throughout the hour, we'll be talking about ways of addressing this deadly public health crisis. One is the helpline you see there from the federal government Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. The phone number is 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-HELP. Someone to talk to, a resource to draw on, perhaps. It's certainly not the only one. So tonight we'll talk about the government response with Ann Milgram, who heads the Drug Enforcement Administration, also Senator Lindsey Graham, and a public health specialist handling cases up close. But again, just about everyone here with me tonight has been affected by the crisis in their own ways, and those stories we hope will be at the heart of the hour ahead. With me here tonight is Erin Rockwall. 2 years ago, her son Logan died. He was a college freshman. She's here also with her son, Caden, who joins us. Also, April and Owen Martin are with us. Their 21-year-old son, Jordan, died the day after Father's Day almost 3 years ago. And in the audience is Rick Wockwall, Logan's dad, and Jada Martin as well, Jordan's sister. Thank you all. Thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
We just start by, when you got the call about Jordan, you're a police officer. Mm-hmm. You work at a small university. You had heard about fentanyl, but did you know it could be in pills? When you got that call, did you know what happened to your son?
No, at the time we didn't know what happened to him exactly. He was with his girlfriend, and she did tell us that he took a pill.
They went to a friend's house who sold him a pill that he thought was a Percocet.
Yeah, she said they took a Percocet. And we went to the house, and he was there, and the medics were working on him.
Immediately when she called you?
Yeah, she had called, and the guy who was at the house wasn't letting her call the ambulance. So it delayed it a little bit because...
He would not let them call an ambulance?
No, she was, like, my husband heard him in the background yelling, telling her to hang up the phone and not to call anybody.
He turned out to be a dealer?
Yeah. And we went to the house, and the medics were there working on Jordan. And there was a police officer there that I knew. And whenever I saw him, he asked me, was that my son? And I said, yeah, and I could tell by his face that it wasn't good.
It's remarkable to me that the person who gave that pill to your son, you didn't know who he was, but you got a call a little bit later on that month from another parent. What did that parent tell you?
They informed us that a month before my son passing, that the same person sold their son a pill and caused their son's life also.
At the same house?
It wasn't at the same location, but it came from the same person. It wasn't at the building that my son was in. No, it wasn't.
And that person, the drug dealer who sold the pill to your son and to Nathan, who's the other young man who got killed, he was arrested. What sentence did he get for selling two pills that killed two people?
Well, for my son, he got 4 to 9 I'm sorry, 4 to 10 for my son, and then for Nathan, he got 4 to 9, but they're letting him run it together so he could be out in 4 years.
And he admitted that he knew it was fentanyl that he was selling after Nathan died. So he knew the pill he was giving to your child was fentanyl.
Yes, he admitted it in the courtroom to the judge and the prosecutor.
Erin, tell me about Logan.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So Logan was, he was a good kid. He was a vulnerable kid. He was very sensitive. I describe him as, kind of that sensitive kid who would come home from school or just, he got made fun of or he'd be bullied a little bit. So he was vulnerable. Him and Caden were very close, as they were younger. We did a lot of things with the family. I like to kind of use the example of where we're the kind of the classic American family, not perfect. No family is perfect, but we did things with our kids. Fentanyl was not in our toolkit. So
you hadn't really heard of it.
I mean, I had heard of fentanyl, as we started, through the years, wrestle with some things with Logan, he did struggle definitely with some mental health, anxiety, depression issues. And we're really open about that. I think that there's so many families out there who have kids struggling. I mean, after COVID, the crisis, the phones, the social media, all that stuff. So yes, absolutely did he struggle for sure. But fentanyl, it was something I had heard of, but not something I would have ever thought would have killed our child, ever.
The pill he took, he was on a FaceTime call with his girlfriend when he actually took the pill. She actually saw him.
Yes, correct.
Did she know about fentanyl?
She did not know. She saw him take something. She knew he was distraught. They were arguing that night. It was the early morning of Valentine's Day. And so she knew things, but didn't put them all together in terms of those were all signs of an opioid body shutting down, which is one of the reasons what, triggered us to really start speaking out because these kids have to know what to look for. This is not going away and we have to do something.
Caden, how much younger were you from Logan?
14 months.
14 months. And you're in college now.
Yes, I am.
How are you doing? I mean,
with everything that's happened with Logan, I mean, obviously it's been a struggle. To go to school and still try to carry on a normal life because after something like this happens, nothing ever is the same, especially with how close Logan and I were as kids. At times he was my only friend, so that makes it pretty hard.
do you see, I mean, is there a lot on campus, is there a lot of knowledge about fentanyl?
Not really. Recently, though, I go to Grand Canyon University. They have been putting up some signs that I noticed about fentanyl, and I actually just noticed them a few days ago. But other than that, there's not much knowledge that I know about. I try to tell my roommates, my friends, and everyone that I do keep Narcan with me. I usually carry it on me at almost all times.
You do? You carry it with you now?
Yes.
Do all of you do that?
Yes.
Yeah. Narcan, can you tell people what Narcan is, for those who don't know?
It stops the effects of opioids.
Police officers, EMTs now have it, and there's a big push to try to get naloxone, Narcan in as many places as possible. That's something you all support.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, Erin, what do you want to see change? What do you think, what can be done?
I mean, awareness, because I think a lot of it is that people just don't know. They don't understand that fentanyl is in everything. And then a lot of people don't understand what to look for when people are, having those effects of fentanyl. So I think it's just awareness, letting people just getting the word out about it.
The ease with which it's, oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to piggyback off of what April said. A couple things that are really important right now is that, there's a stigma attached with a drug death. There's always been. And so, but we're not in, 20 years ago where some of these kids are not, going to the 30, 40 years old with, strong addictions. And even then there shouldn't be a stigma with it. I mean, these people are struggling. It's a disease. But there needs to be a very distinguished difference between poisoning and overdose. Overdose is when you take too much of something and you know you took too much of something and then something happens. Sometimes people don't die from that. Poisoning is different. It's like, I like to explain, like if I put something in someone's drink and they die from it, that's a poisoning. They didn't know they took, what they took. And that's a very big thing I want our country to embrace all around. And the fact that it's not a red, white, and blue issue. Like this is a bipartisan issue. It is so important. That's why this is so important, that everybody embraces. This is a crisis. We are losing kids Americans every 8 minutes right now.
What do you think can be done? I mean, what would you like to see?
Tougher laws, more prosecution on the dealers.
4.5 years is, for you,
I feel like it's a slap on the wrist for him. I feel like it's a smack in my face every day that's what he got for taking my son's life.
Caden, was fentanyl something you had known about? I mean, obviously your brother had some struggles with substances, but was that on your radar?
No, not at all. Never had heard about it before my brother passed away.
It's interesting to me that, at colleges now that it's not so widely discussed because, at college people think, oh, they know a drug dealer and, oh, they trust this person is giving them a pill, it's a Xanax, it's a Percocet, when in fact they have no idea what this pill is. The dealer, from what I understand, who killed your son, said that this was from his own personal prescription. Is that right?
Yeah, he said it was from his own personal prescription. He also said he was my son's friend, which he's not my son's friend because all of my children are friends we have met. Majority of my kids' friends come to our house, eat dinner, stay the night. Never met this kid. Didn't know what he looked like until that day.
What was Jordan like? Your eyes light up when you think about him.
I mean, he was a typical kid. He was an athlete. He was an entrepreneur. He had the biggest
I don't know many
smile.
typical kids who are athletes and entrepreneurs. I gotta say, you guys were going to a business flipping houses together.
Yes. At the time of his death, Jordan worked at Amazon. He had a gutter cleaning business. We wanted to start flipping houses. He was planning for his future. He came to me, he said, 6 months from now, I want to get engaged. He planned on asking his girlfriend to marry him. A year from that, he said he wanted to have his own house. So, I mean, he was planning for the future, and it hurts every day.
What was Logan like?
I mean, Logan loved baseball. He was a big baseball player. He loved our cats. He loved magic tricks. I would definitely describe him as like the funny kid in the family. He loved his brother for sure. They were very close in age when they were little. People would think they were twins.
Is that right?
Yeah. Probably me dressing them alike didn't help. But one of the other biggest things I guess I'd like to mention that is, the brother part, because the siblings are grieving, and that is something that's so critical to me, that these kids get attention, they're forgotten. And so for you to have kids here and Caden here, that's critical. There's just a very big absence in that.
Yeah.
And so this is a life-changing thing to lose a sibling. So that is a huge part of,
It's so interesting you say that, because people don't really talk about that. And my brother died by suicide when he was 23 and I was 21. And I think about you, Caden, going to school. My senior year was a blur. I mean, I don't remember, I'm so sorry for your losses, and I appreciate you talking with us tonight, and I hope it helps. I hope it helps people out there to at least know about the dangers, and some parent out there or some child out there will see this and think twice before somebody hands them something and they take it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right now, a closer look at how fentanyl and products laced with it actually get into this country, starting in China by way of Mexico. CNN's David Culver joins us now from San Ysidro Crossing on the California side of the border. So why is it why is that location where you're at so important in the fight against fentanyl?
I think it's rooted, Anderson, in the stories that you just heard there. I mean, this is incredibly personal and devastating for so many, and it's increasingly becoming a reality for so many. And it starts with stopping fentanyl, and for law enforcement, borders like this one, and really across the San Diego area, it is crucial. They're seeing this major influx. In fact, out of all the fentanyl that's seized across this country at U.S. borders, more than half are seized in the San Diego area. So it is significant here. And border crossings like this one are continuing to see that pressure. But they're also saying, and this is coming from U.S. officials that I've been speaking with, it's not just the U.S. law enforcement that has to do something here. China plays a role in this because that's where the chemical ingredients come from, as does Mexico, because that's where the cartel members are cooking this all up. And so it brought us to question the Mexican law enforcement and the military there in particular. And they say, despite allegations of corruption and that they're not doing enough, that they are doing something. So we said, show us. Here's where they took us.
Culiacan, in the state of Sinaloa, cartel country, as some see it. Here, the Mexican army is on the hunt for drug labs. With 50 soldiers and in a convoy of 6 armored vehicles, we travel out of Culiacan into a rural and mountainous landscape. U.S. officials estimate fentanyl makes Mexico's criminal organizations billions of dollars each year. The cartels, determined to eliminate anyone or anything that might threaten their profit. Colonel Alfredo González Cuevas, our guide.
Y vamos a ver qué.
Taking us to the scene of their latest fentanyl bust.
They're securing the perimeter right now.
Days earlier, he says cartel members opened fire on him and his soldiers.
He said they started shooting at them, hitting the vehicles, and then the 4 guys started running.
The Army's intel led them to this unassuming home in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood.
That white building right there, that's the fentanyl lab.
The Army says they seized 270,000 pills here, all containing fentanyl.
He said they had all sorts of machines to make the pills.
In his nearly 35 years in the Army, working to dismantle drug operations, the colonel tells me fentanyl has been far more devastating and difficult to control than cocaine, heroin, and meth. They test substances to know what exactly they're seizing.
So it shows it here. It's a breakdown of what the chemical is and what makes it up. And then it even has here listed the hazmat component to it.
Crucial in understanding how fentanyl is made is knowing where the chemicals are sourced.
A lot of them, he says, come from the port, which came in from Asia. Higher-ranking military officials have told us most of them come from China.
China's vast chemical industry is where experts say many of the ingredients to manufacture fentanyl, known as precursors, are sourced. And with worsening U.S.-China relations, working with Chinese officials to stop the flow, increasingly challenging.
With China, it's extremely difficult because you don't get information from them. You don't get cooperation from them.
Matt Donahue worked for the DEA for more than 3 decades, retiring last year as its deputy chief of foreign operations.
Mexico's intentionally making these drugs knowing they're killing Americans and still shipping them up there without putting anyone in jail, without seizing any properties or going after all their drug assets.
High-ranking Mexican officials adamantly push back on that claim. Instead, they point to the U.S. to do more on its soil, a sentiment echoed by China. On Monday, the foreign ministry responding to our questions, saying in part, the accusation by some people from the U.S. that China is not further controlling the export of fentanyl precursors because of geopolitical influence is a desecration of the spirit of the rule of law and is completely groundless, adding, using China as a scapegoat will not solve the drug crisis in the United States. Back in Culiacan, the Army keeps a presence at these busted labs 24/7, preserving the scenes for prosecutors and preventing cartel members from restarting production. They also conduct random inspections at package facilities around Culiacan, searching for fentanyl and the precursor chemicals needed to make it. Even setting up checkpoints, working to prevent the distribution of drugs made here.
Wow, he said in one of the searches, for example, it's not uncommon to find that fentanyl or other drugs will be stashed in places like the car wheel or within the car, but even in the gas tank.
Fentanyl, it's sad. It's dirt cheap. You know, you can take a life for probably 5 cents, 10 cents, what it costs them to make a pill. that they're charging $15 for? I mean, what's a human life worth now?
Just days after our visit, Mexican Army officials sent us this video. From the back room of this small home, they seized 600,000 fentanyl pills. Countless lives potentially saved. But the cartel-fueled production is seemingly endless. And so too, the devastation that awaits.
So David, at San Ysidro, where you're at, I assume it's coming mostly through in trucks, in vehicles, or is it people bringing it across as they cross illegally, either at that border point or others?
It's interesting to realize that this is actually happening using American citizens. Officials have told us both in Mexico and here in the U.S. that some American citizens have been among those who are driving across, just like you see the backlog here, and bringing with them, hidden in their vehicles, fentanyl pills. And it's something that is increasingly challenging for U.S. officials, but at the same time, they're making some progress. I'm going to show you this, actually, this tweet, if we can put it up on the screen. This was just in the past week, Anderson, and what you're looking at in this image is 232 pounds of fentanyl, estimated to be about $3 million worth, that were seized last week, and they arrested 3 people in connection with that, but the potential deaths from that are estimated to be around 50 million people. I mean, so that shows you what a small amount has the potential to do and how devastating this is. So how do you stop it? I put that question to now officials in Mexico and here in the U.S. And ultimately, it comes down to international cooperation. This is far bigger than just the U.S. This has to involve Mexican law enforcement as well as officials in China. But to get that level of cooperation, as of now, Anderson, seems next to impossible.
Right. China's not cooperating now on the precursor chemicals. David Culver, appreciate it. A little less than a year ago, the Drug Enforcement Administration created an exhibit at its Arlington, Virginia headquarters. It's called The Faces of Fentanyl. The agency invited families of fentanyl victims to send photos. So far, they've received more than 5,000. DA Administrator Ann Milgram joins us now. David goes out on a raid with Mexican military. Clearly, they're trying to do something. But, I mean, the problem is in many places, but Mexico, that's where the cartels, they're the ones making the money off this. They're the ones getting this in here, aren't they?
So first, thank you for having me. And if I could, I wanted to address before I started the tragedy that's been unfolding in Mexico today and over the last few days, and just say that
4 American citizens were kidnapped by cartel. 2 of them were killed. 2 of them are still alive.
Yes, DEA is actively working with our law enforcement partners, and we will continue to do everything we can as part of that investigation. Last year in 2022, DEA seized 57 million fake fentanyl pills in every single state in the United States. We seized more than 13,000 pounds of fentanyl for a total that equals about 410 potentially deadly doses. It is a level of devastation and that is almost hard for us to quantify. So we're seeing this, and it's playing out in the unspeakable tragedies every single day across our country. It starts in China with the precursor chemicals that are coming from these Chinese chemical companies.
But even if you were able to stop in China, India is already starting to make some precursor chemicals, aren't they also?
So the second country that we think about is India, but predominantly right now it's China, and India is incredibly cooperative.
And is China cooperating?
China is not working with our law enforcement teams at this moment. And part of what's really critical to understand is that we're talking about fentanyl, which is a man-made drug. And so the only limit on the amount of fentanyl that the 2 cartels in Mexico, Sinaloa and Jalisco, can make, and those are the 2 cartels responsible for the fentanyl that's killing Americans, the only limit on how much fentanyl they can make is the amount of precursor chemicals they can get.
It seems like you chop off the head of, the Sinaloa cartel. El Chapo's in prison in the United States. He was Sinaloa, right?
He was Sinaloa.
He's in prison. His son's running it, and they just keep going, though.
So in this moment in time, the question I ask every day is, how can we save lives? It is not a war on drugs. It is a fight to save lives. And so we have shifted completely how we operate. We've gone from targeting high-value targets, we call them, HVTs, like El Chapo, the head of the organization, to now targeting the entire criminal networks. And we are now tracking thousands of members of those 2 cartels, associates, facilitators in more than 40 countries around the world.
So it's not just cartel gangs in Mexico itself. It's lawyers and business people and people who are working for the cartels in the United States and elsewhere?
We are actively investigating the entire supply chain. So starting with Chinese precursor chemical companies, to the cartels in Mexico making the fentanyl, to the people that are selling it for them in the United States on social media, and then the illicit finance, the money that's going back to the
Explain the
cartels.
precursor chemicals, because originally China used to fentanyl was coming directly from China. Then China did act on that with
right.
the U.S. In cooperation with the U.S. But precursor chemicals, which are used to actually make fentanyl, those are now being sent from China to Mexico.
That's exactly right. So China scheduled fentanyl, finished fentanyl, in 2019. At that point, the cartels started bringing these precursor chemicals, which are essentially the chemicals you need to make fentanyl, and you can do it with a number of different chemicals. They started bringing them into Mexico. They now run secret labs throughout Mexico, these two cartels.
And they've simplified the formula so that it's pretty easy to make. You don't need a very experienced chemist as a cook.
That's right. That's right. When it started, it was chemists, and now they still have chemists on their staff. I mean, again, they're facilitators of the cartel's work, but they also now have cooks, and they have simplified it to the point where it's cheap to make, it's easy to make, and the same pill that costs about 10 cents for a cartel to make in Mexico is sold on the streets of the U.S.
So those who say, bomb the cartels, attack the cartels, get tough, what do you say?
So I would say that there's no question our top operational priority is to defeat those two cartels worldwide. And so we're mapping them and we're investigating the entire networks to dismantle them and degrade them. I believe that's where we have to start because, again, this is a limitless amount of a drug that could be on the streets of our country.
You talked about, which I think is interesting, is that how social media is the highway for fentanyl in America. Explain that.
Yeah, so one of the things we've seen is that the cartels are flooding the U.S. with fentanyl, and one of the things they're doing is their traffickers and the people selling it for them are all over social media. So it used to be that someone who was purchasing drugs would go into an open-air drug market or have to know a dealer. Now, every single American that has a cell phone, a smartphone, literally has a drug dealer in their pocket. There is no more dangerous place right now in the United States than social media sites where hundreds of millions of Americans are on every
And that
day.
contributes to, the motivation and the willingness of drug dealers to kill their clients. It's not people they know, it's somebody who's ordered a drug on Snapchat and paid for it with Venmo, and then some other person has delivered it.
Yeah, the question I get more than any other question is why would a dealer kill their customer? And the bottom line is, first of all, these are ruthless, violent cartels, and they are poisoning Americans to drive addiction and to profit. And they now have social media. So whereas someone might have had a face-to-face relationship with a drug dealer, they're now on social media, which is largely anonymous in many instances, and where a lot of people have a sense of safety that they shouldn't have, but they have a sense of safety. And the other point just on this, Anderson, is on social media, we should be clear that the cartels are not being truthful about what they're selling. This is filled with lies and deceit and treachery. They're selling these pills as though they were Oxycontin or Xanax or Adderall.
They're not saying this is fentanyl.
Exactly. And those pills are actually fentanyl and filler, and they're killing Americans at devastating rates.
And why are they using fentanyl? Just because it's a bigger high that will get more people addicted? It's cheaper?
Both. The same pill that they can make for 10 cents in Mexico sells for between $10 and $30 in the U.S. It is the most devastatingly addictive drug we have ever seen widespread.
So those who say tougher sentencing, Owens, the man who killed his son and somebody else got 4.5 years. Should there be tougher sentencing?
Look, we're working across the country right now with police departments and with prosecutors, and we brought hundreds of cases that we call death-resulting investigations. We try to work as much as we can through the federal system, under the federal laws, where we've gotten very significant sentences, but this is something we all have to be working on. One of the other really important things as I was listening to April and Owen is that we try to respond as quickly as we can, and so we tell every police department in America, if you have this, call us and we will help you understand what evidence to keep, what to do. We believe we can stop the next person from dying if we can respond quickly enough and stop that dealer from selling pills and fentanyl that's cut into cocaine or methamphetamine or heroin that will kill someone.
We got to take a short break. Administrator Milgram is going to stay with us. I want our audience members to have a chance to ask some questions when we come back. Also, had Senator Lindsey Graham is going to join us on what lawmakers in both parties can do to try to strengthen the federal response to the crisis. And later, a conversation with two people on the front lines, a doctor, a former doctor who lost nearly everything to addiction, but battled back and is helping others to do the same. And welcome back to our CNN Town Hall on the fentanyl crisis. The federal helpline number you see there on the screen, 1-800-662-HELP or 4357 1-800-662-HELP. We're back talking tonight with DEA Administrator Ann Milgram and taking questions now from our audience. I want to introduce our audience to Bree O'Connor. Bree lost her nephew when he thought he was purchasing oxycodone. It turned out to be fentanyl. He found a dealer on Snapchat. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
What is your question for Ann?
How do we address the issue of dealers using platforms like Snapchat to find and sell to their customers?
And actually, before you answer that, I do just want, because we mentioned Snapchat before, I just want to point out we reached out to Snapchat, who sent us a statement that said, we're committed to doing our part to fight the national fentanyl poisoning crisis, which includes using cutting-edge technology to help us proactively find and shut down drug dealers' accounts. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So Bree, I'm so sorry for your loss. And you raise a question that we are asking every single day. Anderson showed the Faces of Fentanyl wall in DEA headquarters before. And if you and I walked along that wall, I could show you the faces of Americans who've died from Snapchat, buying a pill on Snapchat, from Instagram, from Facebook Marketplace, and on and on. And it is absolutely devastating. The social media companies, in my view, are not doing nearly enough to stop the harm. We have seen that there are ways that they can take action. In the past, they had stopped terrorism videos. We've seen changes that have come in things like human trafficking through congressional laws. What they have not been willing to do up until this point in time, in my view, is take responsibility for what their sites are, what's happening on their sites every day. So to just address what Snapchat has said, we know that's not accurate. We are all over social media. We are doing investigations of cases that come from social media, and we routinely are finding posts that are on all of the social media platforms for days, for weeks, for months, and it is unacceptable. I believe there has to be greater accountability. I believe that, even think about what you just said, that they're telling us that they're doing everything they can.
Right. They said they are committed to doing everything they can in the fight, and they're using cutting-edge technology to help us proactively find and shut down drugs.
And they won't show us that technology, right? They won't let outside experts come in. They will not, at this point, allow auditors or others who could actually help them improve their platforms come in, and that can't be acceptable. We're talking about 107,735 Americans' lives lost between August of 2021 and August of 2022. Whatever they're doing is not enough.
This is Janine Williamson. Her stepson, Jeremiah Robertson, died last October. He took what he thought was a Percocet, which was laced with a deadly dose of fentanyl. Ms. Williamson, you and I talked beforehand. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I have a two-part question. I would like to know, what kind of training are we going to give first responders who interface with someone who's had an overdose? And then what type of follow-up are we going to give to ensure that people who overdose can be connected with care?
Yes, so I'm so sorry for your loss as well. And I just want to say also how inspiring it is to me that all of you are taking incredible tragedies and raising awareness, because I don't think there's anything more important that all of us can be doing than talking about the harm and what we're seeing. So in terms of training for first responders, every single DEA agent in America carries naloxone. I carry it as well. And we are going to offer training for police officers and EMT on not only this, but also how to respond to a drug poisoning, what they can and should do. The first moments matter enormously. And so we want to do that. The other question you asked, I think one of the things that we are very focused on at DEA is how do we expand access to treatment as well across the United States for people who have substance use disorder. So we've been working on expanding access to medication for opioid use disorder. There's a recent bill that Congress passed, the president signed, that removed barriers to treatment. So we've now gone from about 200,000 medical practitioners being able to prescribe this life-saving care to every single medical practitioner in the United States. So we have to keep working on it, but it is a vital part of what we can do and how we have to make sure everyone is aware of the harms and what we can do to help.
Thank you for your question. This is Danielle Ampad. She's a professor of epidemiology. She's worked with people who use drugs for more than 2 decades. She's also the deputy director of the Center for Drug Use and HIV Research and the vice dean for academic affairs at New York University School of Global Public Health. What's your question?
Good evening. Thank you.
You do a lot there. That's a very long title.
It's a long day. In light of the documented success of overdose prevention centers in reducing overdose deaths, what steps is the DEA taking to support the establishment of OPCs as a harm reduction strategy in communities across the United States?
So thank you for that question. We have 3 top priorities at DEA right now. The first is to defeat the 2 cartels that we believe are responsible for the unprecedented and catastrophic loss of life. The second is to raise public awareness. And the third is to do everything we can to expand access to treatment so that every American who needs treatment can have it. There is no question at this moment in time that everything, and this is a whole of government approach, so we have partners at Health and Human Services. We work with them every single day at Veterans Affairs. Everyone in the U.S. government has to work and do what they can to make sure that we are getting Americans what they need at this devastating time. And we also have to understand that this is different than, as much respect as I have for the work that you've been doing for all these years, and I admire it so greatly. I believe that we are in the same situation in some ways, but also in very different ways, where what we are now seeing is many people are taking drugs that they don't even know they're taking as well. So this is a catastrophic moment where every part of government has to be doing everything we can to save lives.
I mean, that's the thing. People don't know they're taking this. As somebody who's a new parent, I've got a couple of years on this, but, my oldest is 3 and the youngest is 1, but that they can be in college and somebody hands them some pill that they think is something like a Xanax that's a prescription pill, and it kills them. I mean, it's stunning.
Yeah, that is what we see the cartels doing, is being deliberate and calculated with their treachery and their lies. They are making these pills to look exactly like a Percocet, exactly like an Oxy or an Adderall or OxyContin, or they're hiding fentanyl in drugs that Americans may be buying, like cocaine or methamphetamine or heroin. And what's happening is people are dying at these catastrophic and unprecedented rates, and they're doing it, we believe, to drive addiction. And they're doing it because the more people who are buying, the more money they make. And so this is a threat unlike any we have seen before. And so we need to bring every single tool we have in the government, whether it's public health or it's enforcement or it's expanding the aperture to treatment. We have to be doing everything to save lives.
I want to introduce David Frank. He's a medical sociologist who studies opioid use and treatment at New York University and has been on a long-term methadone maintenance treatment. You've got a question for Ann.
Yes, thank you. Drug checking programs that can test for levels of fentanyl and other adulterants are such a common sense and evidence-based strategy to reduce overdose. Why aren't we doing more with them?
And sorry, before you answer, I just want to show some video of what Mr. Frank is talking about, at least one example of it. This is testing strips that can measure if fentanyl is found in any drugs that have been purchased. Does that actually work?
So, the Health and Human Services folks are the experts on this. What I can tell you from what we see is that it does work, but we also have to be very careful when it comes to something like pills, because you were talking before about the amount of fentanyl that's deadly. It's the amount that could be on the tip of a pencil. There is no way to just scrape off a piece of a pill and use a fentanyl test strip and know that that pill is safe.
So you can't just rub a little bit of the pill.
You cannot. You would have to crush the whole pill.
So you would have to crush the pill and dissolve it in water.
Yes, essentially.
But wouldn't that then nullify the, I mean, would
Yes.
somebody who wants to use that pill do that?
Yes. So while these are important parts of the conversation to have when it comes to fake pills, and again we see 57 million of them, fake fentanyl pills last year. It would not be something where we could tell you with a fentanyl test strip whether or not a pill from scraping it was safe. And so I think the assumption has to be in America in 2023 that any pill that was not given to you by your doctor, prescribed directly to you, that any pill like that wasn't given to you personally by your doctor is not safe and can kill.
And Milgram, appreciate your time. We are going to get more questions in a moment. Coming up, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is going to join us to discuss what Congress can do to control the flow of fentanyl into the country. We'll be right back. And we're back with our CNN Town Hall, America Addicted, the Fentanyl Crisis. We heard from DEA Administrator Ann Milgram before the break. Right now, what lawmakers may be able to do. Our next guest is Republican Senator from South Carolina who's co-sponsoring a bill to try to reduce the supply of fentanyl and similar substances known as fentanyl analogs. It would make permanent their classification as Schedule I drugs. I'm joined now by Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham, I appreciate you joining the conversation. Talk about what you and Senator Cotton of Arkansas have introduced as legislation on fentanyl.
Well, number one, fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction more than it is a drug. I mean, the people in your audience have suffered terrible losses, and we're not doing enough about it. So Schedule I is the highest level you can put a drug on in terms of punishment. Fentanyl is due to come off that schedule at the end of the year. That's ridiculous. So we're going to keep it on Schedule I, but I want to do more than that. The drug cartels that are sending this poison into our country need to be considered terrorist organizations. The law enforcement model is not working. This is not working. So we need to take a different approach. Let's call these drug cartels terrorists because they're terrorizing America and go after them with a different model.
What does that model look like to you? And Milgram from the DA was talking about saying that's what they're doing, except not just trying to chop the head off like with El Chapo, put him in prison because now his son's running it. But go after the whole networks, their lawyers, their businesses, their phony corporations.
Well, what they're doing is not working because there are 14,700 pounds of fentanyl seized in 2022. We're at over 12,000 already in 4 months of the 2023 fiscal year. So what would I do? Foreign terrorist organization designation to drug cartels allows us to have extraterritorial jurisdiction to go after them more aggressively. What did Bill Clinton do when it came to the Colombia cocaine problem? He sent the U.S. military to the country of Colombia to actually get involved in eradicating the cocaine dealers in Colombia to stop the flow in the United States. So what would I propose? That we make drug cartels foreign terrorist organizations and we use military force, if necessary, to stop their poisoning of America, blow their labs up.
In terms of actually drugs coming in, it seems like they're coming in through the border checkpoints, particularly that's where they're being seized most, commercial vehicles. A lot of Americans actually even bringing them in for the drug cartels. Drones, any possible way, DHL, FedEx. How do you stop that? I mean, even if you kill a lot of cartel leaders or, seize them, it seems like there's an endless supply of these cartels.
Well, the cost of doing business when it comes to fentanyl needs to go up. We need stiffer punishments. FTO designation would allow us to put these people in jail longer and allow us to go after the networks all over the world. But if you blow up a couple of these labs and kill the drug dealers, they'd have a hard time getting somebody else to come in and open up the new lab. So what did Clinton do? He sent the American military as advisors to help the Colombia military to get on the ground, to hit it at its source. You're never going to win this game at the border. You need to tell Mexico you're harboring drug cartels, you're giving them safe havens, they're terrorizing Americans. They kidnapped 4 Americans, 3 of them from South Carolina, killed 2 of them today. Enough is enough. So let's use every tool in the toolbox to go after them at their source.
Anything to do on China and the precursor chemicals? Because China's now not cooperating.
Absolutely. So let's look at it this way. What's the likelihood that the Communist Chinese Party is unaware of the fact that they have fentanyl precursor drug factories in China and they don't know it? 0. So let's get tough on Mexico. Let's start using the military like we did in Colombia regarding fentanyl. Start blowing up some of these labs and putting these people in jail longer and tell China that you are part of the problem and hold them accountable and start looking at these organizations in China as foreign terrorist organizations. Let's up the game against everybody involved in the fentanyl business from China to Mexico and make the cost of doing business higher.
We've got some questions from people in the room tonight. First is Fiona Farine. Her only son Cameron died in his bedroom of fentanyl poisoning in March of 2018 after taking a pill he thought was OxyContin. Fiona, what's your question for the senator?
Good evening, Senator Graham. How do we begin national education as early as possible in all schools and with messaging, and encourage medical providers to discuss it with young patients and their parents during wellness checks?
Count me in for making this, using the Department of Education to provide information to local schools from whatever age level is appropriate to let kids know, do not take a pill from a stranger. Because, you know, the people in the audience have lost loved ones who were basically tricked. They were given A and it wound up having fentanyl in it and they're dead. You know, young people experiment. That's just part of life. These drug cartels are really terrorists. So count me in on educating young people as to what not to do. Count me in on beefing up border security. But the one thing I'm trying to stress to the audience tonight, that's not enough. We got to go after them where they live and where they reside in Mexico. Urge the Mexican government to be a better partner. And if they won't be a better partner, start taking matters into their own hands.
Senator, I want to introduce you to Nora Madonnik. Her son Benjamin died of fentanyl poisoning in May of 2020. He was 28 years old. Nora, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for being here. What's your question for the senator?
He was my only child. Senator, there are only 2 categories of parents of young adults in this country right now. One, like me, is devastated. And don't be fooled by how we appear. We go to bed every night hoping we won't wake up in the morning. The other is terrified they will become like me. I support making the illicit fentanyl ban permanent to empower our enforcement community. But we need national outreach on a scale we have not seen before, with funding and direction for the states to take action if we are to get ahead of this thing. What is being done stateside?
You know, in my state, the governor is trying to up our game. We had a seizure in Rock Hill, South Carolina, of enough fentanyl to kill everybody in South Carolina. So to everybody in the audience, we're letting you down. I mean, we talk about this all night. Our laws are not working. The law enforcement model is not working. The interdiction at the border is not working. Let's try something new. Count me in for education, more Narcan, finding out, treating people quicker, trying to get people not to take the bait of getting a pill that you shouldn't take, learn from the mistakes that have been made. But I can't stress enough, we're not going to solve this problem until the cost of poisoning Americans goes up, that the fentanyl drug dealers will go in a different line of business if they start getting killed and go to jail.
Senator Graham, this is a question from Dita Bergava. She's lost her son. Her son died, Alec, from fentanyl poisoning July 13, 2018. It was on his 26th birthday. Dita, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Senator Graham, anyone who has lost someone they know to overdose would turn back time to provide a safe place for their loved one to take their drug and save their life. Potentially 100,000 precious lives saved per year, and an opportunity to educate about treatment and recovery provided, especially with the scourge of dangerous and lethal fentanyl. And all the data from Europe, Canada, and a couple of facilities in the U.S. show that safe injection facilities work, prevent people from dying, and give them an opportunity to learn that recovery is real. Senator Graham, would you support legalizing and funding safe injection facilities to save precious lives?
I really don't understand the question, because we're not talking about injections here. We're talking about people taking a pill thinking it was Percocet and it wound up being fentanyl. But the bottom line is what
But they
do
could
I
take the
support?
pill in the safe injection facility. The whole point is
Yeah.
that they would not die if they were doing it safely, where people could help them with Narcan and watch over them, and it would give them the opportunity to eventually. My son died because nobody was there to help him. He had Narcan all around him, and nobody knew he was overdosing. But if he knew there was a safe place to take his drug of choice, he would be alive today, because he wanted nothing more than to be on a path of recovery and enjoy the love of his friends and his family.
To be honest with you, ma'am, no, I don't think that's a very good idea at all. I don't think there is a safe place to do this.
It's too bad, Senator, because 100,000 people is a lot of people in our country that could be alive if they were given the safe place to
I don't think
save
that's
their
the
lives.
answer.
Well, thank you for your question. I appreciate it. Senator Graham, I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it, and wish you well. Take care.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you.
Just ahead, we're going to speak with two people on the front lines of addiction treatment. One, an associate professor of psychiatry at NYU. The other, a former doctor in recovery himself who's helping others in their struggle. And welcome back to our CNN Town Hall about this country's fentanyl crisis. We couldn't end this evening without talking to the people on the front lines of this battle against fentanyl. I'm joined now by Dr. Ayanna Jordan, an associate professor of psychiatry at NYU, and Lou Ortenzio, a former doctor who is in recovery after he became addicted himself while prescribing painkillers to patients. He helps others now with their recoveries as the executive director of Clarksburg Mission in West Virginia. Thank you both so much for being with us. You actually brought Narcan with you.
I did.
So show the guy. I think it's important for people to see that. I actually haven't seen it up close like that.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. Before I get started, I really do just want to express my sincere empathy for the people that are here today. It's not easy. It's more to say I'm beyond just sorry for your loss, but I am committed to doing things differently. Okay? My role as a physician is to save lives. All right? I don't want to blow people up. I want to stop this from ever happening again, right? All right. So thank you for that.
As a physician, this is emotional for you because
Yeah.
you see this up close
I
all the
see
time.
this up close all the time, and I feel like we are not concentrating on the science. This is not a political issue. I also am a scientist, right? So I have an MD and a PhD. So not only do I treat patients who suffer with substance use disorders, but also just misuse substances. And as we know, it is totally expected that people are going to use drugs. That's what teenagers do. That's what adults do. We learned from COVID, myself included, the isolation, the forced lockdown. I use substances more than I had in the past as well, right? We are suffering. And so we can't criminalize our way out of this. We need to focus on the science, what works. We know that investment in mental health services, the DEA talked about that, and I agree with them. We have to get treatment to people. If it's harder to see somebody like me, guess what? People are going to go to the streets. They're going to take their pills from the streets. They're going to get the Ativan and benzos from the streets. And one of the things that's important to understand, Anderson, that we have to really, really think through is we can't just focus on the supply, because when we focus on supply, the people who make the drugs are just going to make something different, right? So that's why we have something called trank dope, because they're cracking down on fentanyl, and you think, okay.
Trank is a thing that veterinarians use.
Yes, trank. The name is xylazine, and it is a tranquilizer that is used for animals, right? And that's being mixed in with the dope now. So heroin and fentanyl and other products, because there's such harsh penalties on fentanyl, that the chemists are saying, okay, let's make something else so that we can circumvent the fentanyl. You understand?
So just you're saying just focusing on the supply, that's not going to solve this problem.
It's not going to solve this problem.
Lou, what do you think?
In West Virginia, we see supply driving demand. There's so much supply, so much first prescription pain pills, then heroin, then methamphetamine, now fentanyl, so much slung on the streets, it drove demand. So we have a high rate of addiction in our state. And so we have to address recovery. We have to offer alternative solutions for folks to live their life.
You know about recovery firsthand. Tell folks a little bit about yourself.
I mean, as a physician, I had access to prescription pain medication in my sample cupboard. And when life got stressful, when I had a headache, I would take one. And sampling that then drove me into heavy duty addiction. I was my own dealer. I had access to all kinds of pain medication.
How long were you doing that before?
Probably 20 years.
Wow.
But I've been sober 19 years. This is my 19-year sober recovery point.
Yes.
I'm so happy you're here.
And now I just want to give back to people. I'm in the same town that I was a contributor to and casualty of the opioid epidemic. And now I just want to give back. I want to show people that there's another way they can live and to facilitate their recovery. At the Clarksburg Mission where I work and the Celebrate Recovery ministry that we have, I see miracles every day. I have great hope in West Virginia now, great hope in our nation as we're talking about this. This is fabulous to be talking about these things that are often held to be secret.
But I hear what you're saying when you say, supply alone, that's not gonna do it. But there are a lot of folks in this room who have lost their children who weren't using drugs, who weren't, consciously trying to, or long-term drug. They were, somebody gave them a Xanax, they thought.
Absolutely.
So cutting the supply, the access to that, you're not saying don't.
No, what I'm saying is that we have to focus on people who are experimenting with drugs as well, both sides, right? And so one of the things, Narcan, naloxone, and this has to be part of a greater harm reduction strategy and saying, what can we do when people are experimenting? This saves lives in the way that we had the height of the HIV epidemic, right, from 1981 to 1990. What's happening right now is blowing that out of the water. More people are dying in 1 year than all of those years combined. And so in the ways in which condoms were freely given out, you can get condoms anywhere. There's no shame in getting condoms. Everyone should know naloxone. No one in this audience should have never seen this. This should be in every subway, every train, every pharmacy.
It's a nasal spray. I mean, there's injectables, but this is a nasal spray that if somebody is ODing.
You can use it, and what it does is it blocks the effects of fentanyl and other opioids. I'm going to open it up so you guys can see. There's nothing magic about it. I'm not going to give it to myself, but just want to show you. It is an intranasal. You put it up in the nostril, and then you push, and it delivers a spray. And that simple action can save lives.
I was talking to Michael Fentanyl, a police officer who responded on January 6th. He was telling me that years ago on a drug bus he was on, a canine got some fentanyl, and he actually did that to a canine, and it worked. Well, he was like, I'm not sure this is going to work, but he did it, and it's incredible what it can do.
No, it's incredible what it can do. And so that's what I mean is that we have to have all hands on board and really support programs that get naloxone out everywhere.
I want to bring in Sarah Leibowitz. She's an elementary school teacher whose daughter died 2 years ago at the age of 22 of an accidental fentanyl poisoning. Sarah, what's your question?
Doctors, thank you so much for all that you do. I would like to know, what are we as a nation doing to address the problem with mental health care and rehabilitation not being accessible to all people who need it?
Oh, yeah. Again, thank you for being here. I'm an addiction psychiatrist, right? So that's someone that not only deals with people who are misusing substances, but also have mental health struggles. One of the things that I think is most important is removing unnecessary barriers to mental health care. And one of the ways to do that is to scale up mental health parity, meaning that no matter what you have in terms of your diagnosis, that it's covered under the insurance. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There's so much stigma, and insurance companies decide what is covered and what's not covered. That is a problem. So really looking for opportunity for universal health care system that would cover mental health. Also, making it really easy for people to be able to see a psychiatrist or other mental health professional, right, via telehealth. So now what's happening is that you have to have an in-person visit, in order to see someone via telehealth. And we want to make sure that what happened during COVID-19 is that people can see someone like me indefinitely and don't necessarily need an in-person visit. Yeah.
There's mental health issues that often drive addiction.
Yeah,
People are
absolutely.
self-medicating, and really that was part of my problem is I had a lot of anxiety. Those pills were pretty magic. But after a while, I was just taking pain pills to stop from being sick. It wasn't a matter of getting high. It was not euphoria.
Right.
It was dope sickness. And dope sickness is absolutely miserable. And what happens, your whole brain reward system gets hijacked. Your prefrontal cortex is taken out of the loop, and you'll do anything.
So what do you think of it, Lou, about safe injection sites? Obviously, Senator Graham does not doesn't seem to support them.
I mean, back in medical school in the 70s, the idea of methadone seemed like a wild idea, but slowly it became accepted. And then medicated assisted treatment, I had an issue with that at one point, but now I fully accept it. I think we have to talk about all those things.
Sam Rivera runs a safe injection site. Sam, can you just talk a little bit about what you do there?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for what you shared. And again, I also send my condolences to everyone who's lost someone. So I first want to be clear that they're overdose prevention centers. They're not safe injection sites. And the language really matters. They're polymodalities, so people come in and use a variety of different drugs in our presence, so that if there is an overdose, we have the opportunity to save these beautiful men and women, uncles, aunts, grandmothers, grandfathers, children, well, children of adults, but really keeping them alive. And when I hear your story, I think about you're here, and Anderson said he's happy you're here. If we don't keep drug users alive, when people talk about sending people to recovery or sending people to treatment, they'll never have that opportunity.
But I mean, look, you've been doing this for a long, long time. When somebody says, well, look, doesn't that encourage people to use? What have you seen?
Not at all. The good doctor said people are going to use. We know that. What we want to do in the interim is while they're using is keep them alive. All of our participants, around 3,000 we registered in 15 months. All of our participants have been to detox and treatment numerous times. So when you hear people from a distance say, just send people to treatment and it'll be fine. Yes, I agree. Let's give more access to treatment. Let's create a system and a place where people can go get the support. But in the interim, we need to keep them alive. And we know that the 3,000 people we've seen in our program have utilized our space more than 65,000 times. That means 65,000 utilizations didn't happen in the street and didn't impact children and other people in the street. We've had 1.7 million units of hazardous waste collected on our site that never stay in the street, and over 750 overdose interventions by keeping these beautiful people with us. If they're with us and stay alive, if we give them an opportunity while they're using, then they could be here. And the other thing is, anytime any one of our participants, because there's this misnomer with harm reduction, anytime one of our participants says they want treatment or they want detox, we go into action immediately. And that's one of the things that we have to make clear out there. When I heard what this beautiful mother was talking about, giving people an opportunity, you see the split. And that split hurts this country deeply. And it hurts us in a way when we're talking about someone taking a pill versus why do we have to have that split? We don't.
I want to bring in Jackie Springer to the conversation. Jackie's son, Austin, died in August 2019 from fentanyl poisoning. She's active in the recovery community and is working to end the stigma of addiction. Jackie, thank you for being here.
Thank you. So my question is, I've read recently that researchers are working on a fentanyl vaccine, and I was wondering how close we are to an approved vaccine and how would that actually work?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And again, my deepest condolences. So unfortunately, we're not quite there yet. But the good news is that there has been a model tested in rats that actually worked, but you know that we're not rats, so that we have to test it in humans. And so the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, is actually funding through the Help and Addiction for Long-Term initiative 2 trials that I know of that is actually testing a opioid vaccine, which fentanyl is a type of opioid, in humans. One is really focused on opioids themselves, right? But then another one specifically on heroin. So that's ongoing, and we have to see what the safety is. It's not quite ready for prime time, but those studies are being done.
How do people get Narcan or naloxone?
Right, exactly. So it depends, and that's one of the...
I mean, is it available over the counter? Can you go into CVS and get it?
Again, it depends. When I genuinely mean that, because it depends on what state you're in, and I think that's one of the issues in terms of why can't there be a national way to be able to disseminate fentanyl. In New York City, right, there is a way that you can get it. You're supposed to be able to go into the pharmacy and just go and get it, but you have to either pay for it, it has to be covered through your insurance, and oftentimes, if I send patients to get it, some pharmacies don't even stock it, which is a problem. So then, and when people want to do better and be safe, then their pharmacy may or may not have it. In other states, you have to get a physician's prescription in order to write it. But that's one of the things. It really does depend on where you live.
Yeah.
In West Virginia, we hope to have over-the-counter Narcan within the next few months. But in the meantime, our staff at the Clarksburg Mission have been trained to be trainers, and we have an unlimited supply of Narcan. So we pass out as much Narcan as we can to keep people alive. And in our Christian perspective, keep them alive until they can meet Jesus Christ. But certainly, the more, and if you had given yourself Narcan, it wouldn't hurt you. So using Narcan doesn't hurt anybody, even if they are not having an opioid crisis.
Lou Hortenzio and Dr. Diana Jordan, I appreciate you being
Yeah,
here so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. I also want to thank all our guests and everybody in the audience tonight. A reminder, if you or someone you know needs assistance, the toll-free number again is 1-800-662-HELP. It's 1-800-662-4357. You can also find help at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website, which you can see there on the screen. Thanks to all our guests tonight. The news continues here on CNN.